Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Today, it's a little bit after Thanksgiving, heading on into here soon, the month of December, and we'll get Christmas going on. And so I hope everybody is on their way to having a happy holidays and, a good Christmas coming up soon. And today, anyway, I have Larry emailed me a little while back, and I wrote his name down and everything, and I was thinking, man, I need to call this guy soon. And anyway, I got a hold of him here a little while ago. We had a good old talk, and I think this is going to be really super cool. So hope you all enjoy it. And before we get started, if anyone out there has a story they want to share on this show, you can contact me at brentonsawin@gmail.com. If you want to contribute to help me with this show, you can go to a link in the description, PayPal me, and it's super easy to use, and I appreciate every contribution that I've received. I promise you that. But anyway, Larry, how you doing, bud?
Well, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, man, and it's been such a pleasure talking to you already. You seem like such a super cool fellow, man, and I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. And I want the fans to know too that we haven't really talked about your stories. We were talking about all kinds of other stuff because I like to hear the stories along with the fan. So you can go ahead and wherever you want to start, man. I know that you have several different categories of stories. So, whatever you think's best, man, you just start out with it, and we'll just wing it. How's that?
All right. That sounds great.
Introduce yourself, though, first.
All right. Well, my name is Larry James. I live currently in Clinton, Oklahoma, which is about an hour west if you get on I-40, the main highway that runs through Oklahoma. It's about an hour west of Oklahoma City is where I live now. And I spent 8 years in the military. I was a special boat squadron in the Navy, which is we're basically a taxi for the SEAL teams and anything else they needed to do. And I got out and came back to Oklahoma, and I went to college, got my degree in music, and pretty much I don't work in music anymore. I was in several different bands, and, and I got married and everything, and the money wasn't there to support a family, so I started working in the oil field and here in Oklahoma and make a pretty good living doing that. And that's pretty much all there is about me. I grew up in eastern Oklahoma, and that's really where a lot of my encounters and everything have happened. I don't know, that seems to be a hot spot for supernatural things, or it was when I was a kid anyway. But
right. Well, man, I tell you what, dude. A lot of people these days appreciate the people who have served in the military, and so from me and many people I speak for, we would want to say thank you for your service there. And because we really acknowledge the fact that it's the people who get out there and they serve this country in that capacity that help us to have the freedoms and the enjoyments that we have in this country that make this country feel free. So thank you, Larry.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment, and most of all of us veterans, we feel the same because the appreciation hasn't always been there. And it's right. Nice to know you sacrificed so much of your life for your country that people do appreciate it. So
right, and so, people need to appreciate those kind of things. I was at the grocery store the other day, and there was this old lady. She was like almost 90 years old. Since she was like 89 or 80, 88, 89, something like that. And and I said, she was such a nice lady. And I said, look, here, let me take that cart back for you, because she had come down all the way to the car. She couldn't find her car, so she used her key fob to find her car. And so it was like beep, 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 And she's like, I can't find my husband. And, you know, and someone who just lived their life that long in this country has done
Yeah.
something good for this country. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, man,
Sure.
I felt so compelled just to say thank you for
Mhm.
being such a nice person in this whole country. I mean, you served your country doing what you do. And
Yeah.
you know, she's a grandmother and she's a mother. She served this country in her
Mhm.
capacity. You know what I'm saying? And I just felt like, hey, saying thank you was appropriate for that woman. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? I mean, I know that's kind
Oh yeah.
of a little bit hard to get. You did what you did for the country. We all have our part in the
Yeah.
world,
Absolutely.
and do the best you can in this world, and you should have some appreciation for it. You know, you might be a teacher
Right.
if you taught people in middle school or kindergarten or something. You know, I appreciate that. When I had the heart attack and then people came and picked me up and IV'd me and took pictures of my heart on the way to the hospital, man, thank you. You know,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? We all
Yeah.
need to have a
Absolutely.
mindset of that, but brave people that get out there and defend the country in the military, oh my goodness, that's that's like Apostle Paul said. There's some people that are deserving of double honor, and I think that the
Yeah.
people that do what you do are worthy of double honor. And
Well, I appreciate that. So.
well, you're welcome, brother. And anyway, you can talk about whatever stories you want to up front and put them in order, however you think that it needs to be. I'll give you the floor.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll probably start out with my first. Well, actually, it's my first and only physical sighting of a Bigfoot. And I grew up, like I said, in eastern Oklahoma, central eastern Oklahoma is where I grew up. A little town called Gore. I grew up about 12, 15 miles northwest of there. I actually grew up out in the middle of nowhere. My nearest neighbor was probably half a mile away. I grew up by a big lake we got in Oklahoma. It's called Lake Tenkiller. And as a kid, you know, my friends during the summertime lived so far away that I didn't get to see them a lot. So, and I was the only boy of the family. So I spent most of my time hunting and fishing, you know, and just doing things boys do. Well, I'd pretty much hunted out, squirrel hunted is what I love to do. I had a single shot 22 rifle that my grandfather got me for my birthday one year, and that's what I used. And I pretty much hunted out this one spot from squirrels. So my dad kept after me to leave them alone and let them repopulate in this specific area. So I went one morning actually, I was going to go find me a new place. It was a place I've been looking at, and I just hadn't explored it enough yet. And I was probably 8, 9 years old, somewhere in there. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but anyway, I'd trekked out down to this place, and I walked out into the woods quite a ways because it was off a road. And I don't know how far I walked out in there, maybe half a mile, maybe a mile, I'm not sure. There was a creek that ran through the middle of the whole property. And I was pretty close to that creek, and there was also a power line that ran through it. So the utility company went in there and cleared out from under the power line, and I was close to that area. And that part will become relevant as the story builds. But I'm sitting there, I'm looking around, I'm listening, I walking around. You know, when you're hunting, you know, you're trying to be quiet, and you're slow, and you're moving. Well, this is typical hunting stealthiness, I guess you want to call it. But I find a good tree to sit down so I can just sit back and watch and listen. Well, I sat on this tree for, maybe 5 minutes, and I heard some rustling over on the side of me. And I was looking, and I couldn't see anything because in eastern Oklahoma, it's a lot like Appalachians or anywhere like that. You know, the woods are pretty thick in places, and there's not a lot of difference in the terrain, I guess. It's probably more hilly the further east you get. But anyway, I was sitting there, and I was like, what is that noise? Because it sounded like it was something big, and I couldn't see anything. And at that point in time, this was in the early 80s, there were no bear in eastern Oklahoma that I'd ever seen. And as a matter of fact, where I grew up, there's still no bear. So, pretty sure it wasn't a bear. Actually, I know it wasn't. But anyway, I look over and I see something kind of move out of the corner of my eye. And, it was kind of reddish, brownish in color. And I just saw the back end of it is what I saw. And then when my eyes were fixed on it, I stood up. Well, when I stood up, this thing just bolted, took off like a shot. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't know what I was seeing. I seen from about its, the lower part of its back down is what I saw. Real well, anyway. And this thing is, if I had to guess the height, I'd say from its feet to the point that I had saw it, it was probably about as tall as me. And, and I was 7, 8 years old, and I'm 6'1" now, so I don't know how tall I was then, but it was a big animal. And, like I said, at this point, I didn't know anything about a Bigfoot. I mean, I grew up, around the Cherokees. My family's Cherokee Indian. I'm Cherokee Indian. And, of course, you grow up with those stories of Sasquatch, but you don't ever make a connection unless you see it, or I didn't anyway. So this thing bolted out, and like I said, it was kind of a reddish, brownish, hairy animal, and it was well defined. I mean, its legs and buttocks and everything were well defined. This thing was pretty muscular. So I'm looking at that. It took off, and I've always been an adventurous spirit kind of guy, even as a kid, and I took off after it. I was like, I'm going to find out what this is. That was going through my mind. Well, it runs across this creek, and still at this point, the brush is so thick, I can barely see it. It's coming in and out of vision. It's going in and out of brush and everything, so I can't really ever get a good fix on it. Well, it jumps across this creek, the best I could tell, because I heard it go through the leaves, and then it didn't make any noise for a second or so, and then I hear a big, kind of like a thud, but it wasn't really, it sounded like it jumped across the creek, I guess is what I'm getting at. But I'm still after this thing, and the power line that I'd mentioned earlier was probably about 300 yards from where I was. Well, by the time I got to the creek itself was probably in between me and the power line, so about 150 yards. So by the time I got to the creek, this thing was already out of sight, but it made a path through the woods that looked like a rhino or something, an elephant had went through there. It just cleared brush as it was going. And I got to the power line clearing, and on the other end of it, it was grown up in greenbriers. They're just a thorny vine is what they are. I'm sure the people that live in the eastern part of the United States know what a greenbrier is. But it was so thick there that only rabbits, could get through that. But this thing tore through them like they were nothing. And that was it. I stopped pursuing after that because I was like, whatever the heck that was, I'm not going any further after it, because then my mind started, what in the world was that? So I ran back home. And the only thing that I could even come close to thinking in North America that it could have been was a bear. But I knew it wasn't a bear. But I ran to my dad and said, Dad, I think I saw a bear, but I'm not sure what it was. And he was like, well, boy, there ain't no bear in this part of the country and all this, And it wasn't too long after that what was that show that Leonard Nimoy used to do back then? He was the host of, I can't remember that show, but anyway, the Patterson film had came on, and that was the first time that I'd ever saw that. And then I knew exactly what it was I saw. So,
In Search of.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
But when I saw that Patterson film, that's when I knew. I was like, I know what that was now. And I tried telling my dad about it, and he didn't poo-poo me off. He just kind of, well, you just kind of stay away from that part of the woods then. Because he grew up in that part of the country too, so I don't know what all he saw. He never told me anything about it, but
So you knew there was just something not right about it. You knew it wasn't a bear.
Yeah,
You knew that
yeah,
you couldn't really identify it, so you were struggling with what it was.
yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Just like I said, Bigfoot at that time was that wasn't really even in my vernacular. I had no idea what it was. So
Right.
now to kind of give a backstory of my life, my great grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee. Her mother actually came to Oklahoma on the Trail of Tears, and my great grandmother was a what they call a medicine woman. She wasn't necessarily a witch doctor or anything like that. She was literally a medicine woman. You know, people from the community came to her for medicines or whatnot. You know, she'd go out in the woods and she knew what herbs to get, what roots to get to make different medicines and this and that. And so that's kind of a backstory to where some more of my encounters have happened. She used to tell my father, because he would go out with her when he was younger, back in the 50s. She's long since passed away before I was born, so I never got to meet her. But she would tell my father that if he ever went out in the woods, don't go alone, don't go at night, and take a gun with you every time, because there's things out there that people don't know about that can hurt you. And he kind of instilled that in me, too. So to this day, I won't go out in the woods without a firearm of some sort. But she used to tell the story, and my dad, this is a third party, or second party, I guess. My dad would relay these stories to me when I was a child. She used to talk about what her mother would say were the little people. Now, and if you talk to the Cherokee Indians back in eastern Oklahoma, if they talk to you, which most of them will talk to you if you go up and talk to them, but they will talk about the little people. And I used to envision as a kid, you know, little, like 3-inch tall people and stuff. But, you know, the more I learn about that, the know these were like probably 3 or 4 foot tall individuals. She said that they followed the Cherokee from the east to Oklahoma, and that's how they got here. And she would describe these little people as reddish-haired, small people, is what they called them. And she said that they were one particular the red-headed ones. I think she said there was 2 different breeds of them. There was one that they didn't get along with, and then there was the other ones that they did get along with. That they would leave food out for them, and they would in turn leave stuff that they would make from the wilderness. So it's baskets, or, you know, primitive baskets. They weren't anything elegant, but they would trade. And that's how the Cherokee got along with them. And that's why they followed them, because that was one of their food sources, apparently. So I grew up with these stories of, of our Cherokee heritage in some detail. And my grandfather used to tell the story that people used to, speaking as my grandfather, he would say people would come down and talk to Mama about how to get curses off of them. And he said Mama would tell him to draw a picture of the person giving a curse and take it back home and hang it up on a fence post and shoot it in the head, and that'd end the curse. And people used to come down. They said that she used to read a verse out of the Bible that would stop bleeding. There was someone got their arm cut off in a cotton gin or a plow or something one time, and he was bleeding to death. And they ran down there, and Grandma stopped the bleeding. And it was just interesting to me as a kid, you know, listening to these stories. I don't know if this has anything to do with the area or not, but this particular story was quite disturbing. I mean, to this day, if I can relate this thing to anything, it would be a demon. I don't know what else to relate it to, but we were at a friend's house one evening. We were spending the night. Me and another friend of mine was spending the night with him, and they lived kind of down in a valley. Well, it wasn't kind of; it was down in the valley. But and up on one side of the hill, they had cleared that trees cleared the trees out of it years ago to make a pasture land because they raise cattle on there. Well, we were outside playing, just doing the regular boy stuff, just being boys. And it was getting dark, so his mama yelled and said, "Y'all come on in." So as we were coming in, this was in the summertime, by the way. It was probably June, if I had to guess. So it was hot outside, and as a matter of fact, what we were doing, there was a light outside on a pole, and bats would fly around that and catch bugs, and we were up there with a sock full of rice, throwing it up, trying to distract them bats and everything, just being boys. But anyway, as we were coming in the house, I'd say this is probably around 9:30 at night, we hear this god-awful scream from up on top of the hill of the field there. And his mom was outside, he was outside, and me and my other friend. And we just stopped, and the hair rose back on the back of our necks, on our arms. It just froze you. It was such a scream. It was a high-pitched shriek, almost. I've never heard anything that even comes close to this thing, unless it was in a horror movie or something. But anyway, we look over on the hill, and we see these red eyes coming down the field. Now, her house was, probably 150 yards from the edge of the woods. And this thing seemed to be skirting along the edge of the woods. So looked like it was coming right at the house. And we just sat there and watched this thing. And the best we could see, the only light we had outside was the light from the pole, the floodlight, we called it. And it illuminated the woods a little bit, so you could see a little bit. This thing looked like a goat, but it was red. And it didn't have the head of a goat. It was kind of like it had a head of a human being, but a deformed human being. I don't know. I can't really describe it, but it had red glowing eyes, and it was running on all fours. And it came running down, skirting these woods, just making this shriek. And we stood there and were just froze watching this thing, and it ran off behind the house. And then when we did get the courage up to move, we ran off down there and never saw it again. Never heard it. Went out the next day looking for tracks, any sign of this thing. We never saw anything. And we were just awestruck. I mean, that thing just like blindsided us. To this day, I've never even heard a story similar to that. I have no idea what that thing was. But I remember the fear from that shriek. We were froze. We couldn't move. And, I don't know how old I was. I was probably 12, 13 at that time. But people had reported similar incidents around that part of Oklahoma around that. Now, I don't know if there's a lot of Indian cemeteries. There's quite a bit of Indian, I guess for lack of better terms, dark magic around there. There's some shamans, if you want to call them that live around there. I don't know if they have anything to do with that. My great-grandma and grandpa used to tell me stories of shapeshifters. And I just don't know if that's what it was. But I believe thoroughly in the shapeshifters.
Right.
My grandpa told a story of a guy that was, an Indian guy that was having an affair with one of the local rancher's wives. Well, the local rancher was out of town one night, and he was coming in. He came home early, and he almost caught the guy. And the guy ran out the back door and ran back home. Well, that next night, that guy was there was a hoot owl sitting out on his stables to his barn, and it was just hooting and hooting. And Grandpa said that guy grabbed a shotgun and went out there and shot that owl. And he said, and it fell down and it flopped around a little bit, and feathers and everything were flying. And he went back out the next morning, going to collect that owl up and go throw it off in the woods. And well, it wasn't there. He's like, well, the coyotes or something got it. Well, that evening they had found the guy that was having the affair dead in his house with shotgun wounds. So that's where the shapeshifters story. That's where I started believing that.
Wow, that's incredible, man. What can you make of that? I mean, that's an incredible story for
well,
sure.
That's not the only shapeshifting story that my grandpa and my dad actually told me. There was an escaped convict. My dad grew up with this guy, and like I said, my grandpa, I think it was 3/4 Cherokee, and then my dad was half Cherokee. So we just grew up. That's how we lived. I mean, we didn't know any difference between Indians and white people. We were all the same back then, or that's the way we lived anyway. But there was this particular Indian was a friend of my dad's. He had committed murder I believe it was in the 60s, and they'd sent him to prison. Well, he escaped prison, and he came back home. And they had tracked him down by a city in eastern Oklahoma called Salisaw. And toward Salisaw, there's this hill, pretty good-sized hill. They call it Round Mountain. And literally, it's this round hill. Oh, it's probably 1,000 feet to the top of it, or well, maybe not that high, maybe 500. But it's out in the middle of a field, and it's round. It's good size. Well, they had chased him on foot to the Round Mountain, and they went back to town and got a bunch of people. There were people sitting there watching it on all sides after they chased him up there. And they went back to town and got I guess you would say, a posse together. And they went down, and they were going to track him down. And they started walking up this hill, and they were all within eyesight of each other, not arm's length, but eyesight. And my dad said when they got about halfway up the hill, the only thing that they found in there was an owl. An owl flew out of there. And they got all the way to the top of the hill, and there was no caves or anything on this hill. They got to the top of the hill, and they didn't find him. But they seen him go in there, and he never left. So my dad, he said that he just used his Indian magic and turned himself into an owl and escaped. And, they never did find him. To this day, he was still one of those that they never found him. But if you ask any of the locals, he would just show up periodically. Everybody knew he was around there. But the cops, the police, whoever was looking for him never could find him. And they would say he would just turn himself into whatever animal was fitting at the time. I was like, wow. So that's another story that is down there that people will tell you. So, and I don't know what to relate that to. I mean, I don't know how that works. If it's true, I don't believe it's a lie, but I just that's beyond my way of thinking. How could you turn yourself into an animal? What kind of power does that take? Where does that power come from? I don't believe it comes from God. I believe it comes somewhere else.
No, it doesn't come from God, that's for sure. But there seems to be some people that are able to do that through dark powers. I've collected a lot of stories, and it seems like to me that there's cases where people are able to do whatever it is that they do. I'm not sure what they do, but they're able to transform into creatures like dogmen, and things like that. It's like, shoot, fire. That's crazy, but it seems to be true. From what I've gathered, they're gathering powers from dark things, like sacrifice and stuff like that.
My opinion would be it's some form of, I guess people would call it magic, although I don't believe it comes from the earth. I believe it's, the Bible talks about fallen angels, the 200 angels that came to Mount Hermon, I believe. And I believe that they taught mankind how to do specific things. And then I believe that that's where that comes from. If you talk to most Indian people, they'll tell you about shapeshifters, because apparently that's that's been around for a long time. So, it
Yeah,
seems
you
that
know, when J.C. Johnson was on, I interviewed him one time, and he was talking about the type of people that were able to transform into these other type of creatures. They had to do certain things, and it was one of them was human sacrifice. And
right.
but once they did that, they were able to basically transform. And then I had one guy on the show one time that talked about a guy who had traded for a jar of ointment, and this dude rubbed the ointment all over his body, and he was able to change into a dog man. And this dude was only like 12 years old when this happened.
Wow.
And he watched this guy rub this ointment all over his body and change into a dog man.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was sitting there like freaking out. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, what the heck is going on here? And finally, he was asking his mom about it, and his mom kept denying it for several years until she finally gave in and said, okay, that's true. It happened. So,
wow.
Very interesting.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say this in regards to one thing I didn't mention. I am a pastor, I'm a preacher. I'm not necessarily a pastor, but I do have a deliverance ministry, if people know what that is. It's not like an exorcist or anything, but I have helped people throughout the years that are having problems with spooky stuff in their house, with themselves. You know, I believe those things are demonic in nature. And, you know, like we've talked before, I believe there are no ghosts. The ghosts are demons that are presenting themselves as ghosts or something that's similar, you know. So I've done house cleansings, I guess, if you want to call it. You know, I've fixed that problem for people. So it takes a person knowing who they are in Christ to be able to confront stuff like that usually. But
you're on the right track because you're right about that. You know, the little people thing is very interesting, and I've wondered about that quite a few times because there seems to be like a Bigfoot creature out in the woods. And there seems to be these little people also. A lot of times they'll think that, okay, that must have been a juvenile Sasquatch or something. But they're not. They're little people.
No.
They're totally different and they're separate.
Like you said, I don't think they're a hybrid or a cross between a Bigfoot or anything. I think they're a specific type of people because, you know, like European legends, they talk about gnomes and stuff like that. I believe they're similar to that. Because it's not just my grandmother or great-grandmother that would tell stories. I have friends when I was a kid that would tell me stories about seeing these little people. Well, matter of fact, one of my friends was telling me his dad was out mowing his yard one day, and he kept feeling like he was being watched, and he would look around and wouldn't see anyone. And off on the edge of the property, he finally looked over and said there was a little people standing there looking at me. And most of the Indians back home where I grew up will tell you these stories about them. And they, like I said, that they say that there's two different kinds of them. That there's some that are mean, that they don't like them, and then there's the other kind that they can trade with, and just they don't ever make themselves known to them fully, but they'll you know, come up on the porch at night and like you leave them an apple out, and they'll leave something in return. And the Indians kind of view them as not necessarily a protector, but a helper, I guess you would say. So, yeah, I believe there's some kind of race of something. I'm not sure what it is, but
no, I agree because I've heard a lot of times about people talking about these little people, and even to the point sometimes where they were wearing little shoes. Not just like some bare naked, like hairy little person. Because a lot of times the little people that people talk about are almost like a little bitty Sasquatch that are little and they're hairy. But there's a different type that is little and they're humanoid. And they're like little humans, but small. In the Four Corners area, they have a lot of these reports. And I had one guy come on the show, and he was talking about Bigfoot stuff. And there was like these... The guy that was working the ground, he was like, dude, you got to get off the dozer and check this out, man. And he showed him footprints. And they were little bitty tiny footprints. They were so far out, there was no possibility of it being children. But he said there were like little shoes, like they had little sandals on or something like that. And also in conjunction with big footprints, you know. So it kind of confused him. He's like, okay, I've seen these big footprints, but I also seen these little tiny prints, but they were with shoes. So he couldn't say they were little tiny Bigfoot, you know.
Well, that goes along the lines of what they would say about them making stuff and trading with them.
Right.
You know, they obviously have some form of technology, or they're advanced to some degree.
A lot of people that see it, but they don't ever say anything about it because it sounds so freaking crazy. It used to be like a lot of people didn't talk about Bigfoot. It's getting more and more where people will talk about Bigfoot now because there's so many shows out there and stuff like that that have made it kind of popular and it's not so taboo anymore. So in some kind of ways, we got to make the other stuff less taboo. It's like, tell me what you saw exactly. I've seen some crazy stuff, and I tell exactly what I saw. You know, like the deal when I was 5 and 6 years old. You know, with this entity with the horns, and I tell about the dude with the floppy nose. You know and I tell it all straight out, man. It's like, look, man, I'm sitting there bearing it all right in front of everyone. And it's like I was really scared to do that because it's like once I do that, my career could be over. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's not like I can go seek a job out anymore. Or someone Google my name and that stuff pops up. Because it's because once you put it out there, it's done. So support this channel. Go to PayPal me in the description. I'm serious, man. I've cut myself off from making a living, for real. You know, someone.
Well, I understand.
Any job that you ever go get, they're going to Google you, and dude, they're not going to give me a job. I could never get a real job no more. Do you believe me or not?
Yeah, I do. No, I do believe it. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Because, like in the Christian world, you know, when I tell people I'm a deliverance minister, you know, they look at you like you got 5 heads sticking out of your body. You know,
I know, and it's what you should be saying. It's insane. It's like, dude, as a Christian, you should be saying for 100%, I am a deliverance. Every Christian minister should be a deliverance ministry minister.
Exactly.
It's like, what
Jesus
other kind of minister is
did
there?
that more than anything. Yeah. I mean, my whole point is, with Christianity, how can you expect someone to believe, you know, it was a supernatural event that happened to born-again Christians.
Yeah.
You know, so how can you expect there not be more supernatural?
I guess it's like this. What seems to be supernatural to us isn't the same as to other people.
Right.
They have an idea of it, but they don't quite know. So therefore, you have to play the field as you know it, and be patient, and eventually, God will send you the right people. For you to help. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we can't, it's almost like you can't blame the other people. It's like, okay, you don't know.
Right. Right.
But that's
Yeah, I
because the
understand what
world
you're
is
saying,
deceptive. The world is very
Mhm.
deceptive. And God has given you the right to know. He's given you the
Yes.
privilege to know. He's given you the gift to know. And
Mhm.
he's saying, I want you to be patient with my children, and I'm going to send them to you when they're ready. And
Yeah.
he's going to send you before they're ready, really. And you're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
prep them. You're going to help prep them.
Right.
And the Lord is trusting you to do that because he knows that you're able.
Right.
So
Well, that's along the lines with this Bigfoot phenomenon, the dogman. I don't believe these are God-created creatures.
no.
You know, I agree with you,
Right.
and I believe that I'm an avid hunter. I spend more time than I should out hunting. My wife kind of gets annoyed at me sometimes, but when I'm hunting for regular animals to eat, I'm hunting for these things too, because I don't think they're up to good. I don't think they're this
Right.
docile little animal out there that, wants their ears petted. So I'm looking for these things because, with my military experience and a hunter and everything, I know about ballistics, and I've known a lot of people talk about shooting a dog man and a Bigfoot and stuff and not killing it. Well, you can shoot. I've seen human beings get shot with high caliber rifles and not die.
You can kill a Bigfoot and you can kill a dog man. That's bull.
Exactly. If it bleeds, it's going to die.
Yeah, you can
You
kill
just
it.
got to find the right amount of firepower.
Yeah, and and shoot it in the right place.
Right. Your bullet placement and ballistics. That's your two friends right there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, they'll die.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a deception. They will
Exactly.
absolutely die, and they know it. That's
Yes.
why they back off when
Mhm.
you got a gun.
Right. Yeah, that helps to tell to me every time I hear someone speak of that, where, it kind of backed
Right.
up when they saw they had a gun. Well, it's afraid of it.
Right.
So
It might take a
it
minute
knows
for
what
it to
it's
die
gonna do.
because they are bulky.
Right.
There's some of these Bigfoot are huge. You don't want to shoot it with a 22
Mhm.
and expect it to die right now. But you
Right,
shoot it with
exactly.
a 22 in the face 20 times, it will die. But it might take a little while.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't necessarily go hunting a Bigfoot with a small caliber weapon because
Exactly.
you'll get yourself killed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't shoot bear with a small caliber weapon.
No.
But if you make something, you injure it long enough and enough, or you know what I'm saying, you'll cut.
Yeah.
A 22 is if you shoot something in the head, I don't care how big you are. If you have a decent caliber weapon, you shoot something in the head, it's gonna die.
Yep, exactly.
It's gonna cause it a problem for living.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, military vets will tell you that if you want something to die, you shoot it in the head.
Because the 22 bullet, it ricochets around. You shoot somebody in the face with it, or even in the ribs, it can ricochet around in the rib cage and bam, 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 bam. Next thing you know, you got all kinds of injuries.
Exactly.
It's actually a very dangerous weapon, but it might take a little bit to happen. So, like if you were going bear hunting or something, I wouldn't recommend a 22 because you could shoot a bear with a 22 several times, and the bear will keep coming at you. Because it's not going to slow it down at first, but eventually it'll kill it.
Yeah. Yeah. Then comes the question: is it going to get you before it drops? So,
Right. Yeah. So
that's why you want a big caliber.
Right. Yeah. So I get why people would say some of that kind of stuff, but
Sure.
it's not realistic that a 22 will kill anything. Actually, the Mossad, for when it came to Israel and some of their Secret Service kind of folks and stuff, the Mossad used 22s, and they would shoot somebody like 7 times with 22, and it was their signature deal that it was the Mossad that got you.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, those bullets would ricochet around in people, and you know it'd kill them every time. Bam, bam, bam. You know, they would just empty a clip on somebody. Bap, 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 bap. You know.
Right.
It was like Swiss cheese instead of making one big hole through cheese.
Yeah. So I'm. That is a desire I've always had. Since I've been a Christian, anyways. You know, I hear these stories of people going out in their wilderness life, if you want to say that, it's ruined from encountering these things, and that just makes me mad. And I don't know. I just my desire is to help people, and if I can help people, then I'm certainly. The Bible says if it's in your ability to help someone, it's a sin really to not help them. So, and I believe I have the ability to help some people. So there it is. I want to help. So, but I'm not out hunting a Bigfoot or a dog man. But I'm, they're out there, and as much as I'm out there, it stands to reason that I would run into one at some point. So I want to be ready if I do. So.
What about the Sprites, man? Is that something different than we, talked about already, or what? Tell us about Sprites.
Well, I don't really know where to begin. I mean, this story
anywhere.
It's crazy. I mean,
I know, but just tell us. Just tell us about Sprites. Sprites are very interesting to me because I've collected a few stories about those, but I haven't had that many, so I don't know what to make of the Sprite thing, other than some of the stories I collected that were more like what would you call them? They were. I can't remember what they called them, but they were like little creatures that were winged, and they would. This one fellow that had Bigfoot encounters, he said, "Man, I encountered a creature one time that was at the creek, and it was flying, and it was like the wings were like iridescent." And it was like hovering above the creek, and it was flying along. And he said, I was looking at it, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. But it seemed to him like a fairy. That's what he was kind of thinking of, like a fairy. To me, the sprite or the fairy or anything like that is about like the same thing.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you might be right, because this was one of the strangest stories a friend of mine, ever told me. I mean, my friend was saying that he was out down on his creek behind his house one day. And I guess he used to go down there a lot. We used to go down there a lot to play around. There were some big rocks on it that we used to climb on. I mean, these are massive rocks, probably 12, 15 foot tall. And we'd just climb around, and some of them were close together so we could jump, from rock to rock, just being kids. And he was down there messing around one day, and he was down there by himself, and he said he heard a hummingbird flying around, and it was several of them. And he's like, "Whoa, wow! I've never seen more than one hummingbird in this area." He'd never seen any hummingbirds in that area, matter of fact. But he said he sat down on this rock that he was climbing on, and this hummingbird would come up behind him, and when he would turn to look at it, it would like dart on the other side so it couldn't see him. And he said this particular incident happened, 5 minutes or so, something like that. He didn't really go into detail, but the way he was telling the story, it sounded like it. And then another one appeared, and it was like they were ganging up on him, or not hurting him or anything, but ganging up behind him. And every time he'd turn to look at them, whichever way he would turn, they would fly to the opposite way. And he started, what is this? And he said, and it stopped. And he turned around, and he looked behind him, and he said, and there was these miniature people with wings like a hummingbird. So they were just standing on this rock, like 3 of them, standing there looking at him. And he said he didn't know how to accept this, what he was seeing. And they just kind of jumped up and buzzed off. And that's all he seen. And it took him a long time to tell this story because, like we were talking earlier, he didn't want people to think he was a nut, you know. And we were out one time, me and my aunt and a cousin of mine. It was late in the evening one evening, and we were out. This is in the summertime. We were out catching lightning bugs. And my aunt at this time, she was 4 years older than me, so we always hung out together. But we were out catching lightning bugs in the evening. It was getting dark. And it was almost like the same story, but they weren't coming up behind us hiding themselves. It was like they would flash in front of us. And you would hear them. You know what a hummingbird, the wings sound like. You can definitely distinctly hear it. Well, these things were probably 15 feet would flash in front of us, but it was dusk enough to where we couldn't really see very well in that, you know, where they were. These things would fly by, you know, and finally one of them kind of darted by, and it kind of paused for a second, just enough for us to get a clear picture of it, and immediately we could see instantly that was not a hummingbird. And it was like a little woman, if I could say that. I mean, I don't even know. It had a woman-like features, but it was like 3 feet tall. And we're sitting there, and we looked at each other, looked back at it, and it just took off. And it was a long time before we... Yeah, this thing was like 3 feet tall. I mean, I guess it was tiny. Not much bigger than a hummingbird, if I was to have to say that.
Well, 3 feet, that's pretty big.
Oh, not 3, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry. Not 3 feet, 3 inches.
Oh, 3 inches, okay, I'm sorry. All right, I was going to say, oh my gosh, 3 feet, that's huge.
No,
okay,
no,
3 inches, that makes more sense. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was like 3 inches tall. And the way that my friend had described it, we had seen the same thing because it was probably 2 or 3 years when we got to talking about it, because I was asking him, because I had already had my encounter, me and my aunt and my other cousin, and when I was talking to him about, he just came up and started talking to me about it one day, and from talking to him, his encounter happened about 2 years before ours did, give or take a few months, but they were all in a general area within 20 square miles of each other, I would have to say, in eastern Oklahoma, and it just blew my mind. And to this day, I'm just like, did I really see that? It's one of those deals that I don't know. It was just so strange to have something like that, a small entity like that. I don't know. It kind of looked human, but then it didn't. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but we thought we were crazy for a while, but we wouldn't talk about it. And then we finally started talking about it and started realizing we'd seen the same thing. So we weren't high or anything. We were kids. So, but to this day, I don't know what to make of it. Have you heard of any other stuff like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I have, man. There's been people that describe the same thing. I've had people send me pictures of, but they were blurry, and it's like, okay, I could show these, but they looked kind of convincing, but they were iffy, and I didn't want to go there, you know what I mean? Unless they were convincing,
right?
You know what I'm saying? So I believe it. You know, I've seen so many things in my lifetime that I believe 100%.
Right.
You know what you see.
Right.
I don't need to convince you. You know what you saw.
Uh-huh.
And whenever people try to talk you out of what you saw, That's wrong. You should believe a person when they say, "This is what I saw." It would be different if it wasn't like so many cases of it, but there's a lot of cases where people said, "This is what I saw," and they were small creatures with wings that were flying about. I believe you 100%.
Yeah.
Dude.
That's good. That's one thing. I've talked about my Bigfoot sighting and stuff and other things, but that was one that I've never really talked a whole lot about.
Yeah, because it sounds crazier. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, it does.
So the more that people come out and share these other type stories, the more that it's going to be easy for other people to come out and say, "Hey, I saw that too."
I've had demons actually. I was in a deliverance service. Well, I was in a deliverance session, I guess you would call it, with a particular individual one time, and I had 3 demons manifest themselves right in front of me. I mean, they were probably 2 feet from me, and
Right.
I didn't know that. I'd never heard of that ever happening, but it did. It happened with me, and these things, there were 3 of them, like I said, and they looked human, but their facial features and hair on their head and stuff and their body was not human. It was just deformed, very deformed. And it was like they stepped out of this person, stopped for a minute and looked at me and gave me this look like, if we could kill you right now, we would. And then they just disappeared. And the person that I was in the session with, it was me, my friend Anthony, and her. And I think she had a friend there too. I don't remember. But anyway, she didn't see it, he didn't see it, and the other person didn't see it. I don't know why I did. But it kind of freaked me out first time because that never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. And I've been in several cases where I've helped people, and that's never happened again. So that was weird. I've never understood why that happened. I've always wondered why. It's kind of left me wondering why.
Yeah, I've heard of the demon type thing like that before. I know some people that were actually doing a deliverance thing, and they said almost the same thing, that like this demon leaned up out of the person and looked at them with like this extreme hatred. And anyway, I want to let the audience know at this point, me and Larry had some connection issues. The line dropped and stuff like that, and when I finally got him back on, we just kind of wrapped up the conversation. And I appreciate Larry coming on and sharing all these fantastic stories, because they are really just very interesting, and from Bigfoot all the way up to demon entities manifesting it. There's a lot of strange things that happen in this world. And so thank you, Larry, for sharing. And everybody out there in YouTube land, thank you for listening. But God bless you. Hope you all enjoyed the program. If you want to share anything, to email me. I leave that in the description. If you want to contribute, you can go to the link in the description for PayPal me. And until next time, God bless you, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.